Even with a perfectly defined scope and a great plan in place, that's still not enough for your project to succeed. There are two critical things you need to do to make sure you have success. Things that make the difference between a leader and a manager. In this video, I'll show you what they are and how they can transform your projects. I remember a time when I first discovered the importance of having a clear scope and a strong plan. I had spent hours perfecting the scope definition and creating a detailed Gantt chart for my project. I thought I was golden. I handed it off to my team and assumed they'd know exactly what to do. After all, they were professionals. They didn't need me micromanaging them, right? So I left them to work on the project while I focused on my other responsibilities. For 2 to 3 weeks, I didn't really check in. I was certain that when I came back, the project would either be completed or at least on the perfect track. But when I returned, I was shocked. The project was almost untouched. Now, you might think the team wasn't working hard, but that wasn't the case. In fact, I rarely encounter a team that isn't hardworking. This team was no exception. They were dedicated and putting in the effort. So, what went wrong? As they started working on the project, they ran into issues we hadn't anticipated in the plan. Things like another urgent project that needed their attention, small, unexpected tasks that popped up along the way, technical problems that made some tasks more complicated than expected. Without a clear guidance or priorities, they didn't know how to handle these challenges. They didn't know which project or task to prioritize, how to resolve technical dilemmas, or even if they should proceed as originally planned. Looking back, I realized that my team didn't fail because they lacked skills or motivation. They struggled because I didn't provide the direction they needed. That's when I learned that leadership during execution is just as important as the plan itself. And that's where the third pillar of IT project management, execution, comes in, consisting of two key elements: development coordination and risk management. Development coordination is all about keeping your team aligned, on track, and focused on the right priorities throughout the project. This is where project management frameworks like Scrum or Kanban come in. But regardless of which one you will be using, there are 3 key steps to development coordination that will keep your project on track and your team aligned. First, do regular check-ins with your team. These are often called daily calls, stand-ups, or something similar. They don't necessarily have to happen every single day. 2 or 3 times a week can also work, but keeping them regular is crucial. Regular check-ins make sure that you're on top of what's happening in the project, that you can help the team solve any issues, and that you spot delays or roadblocks early. For example, during a check-in, if an engineer mentions that a task estimated to take 3 days is still in its early stages on day 2, you'll know to step in. You might offer additional support, bring in more experienced engineer to help, or reassess the approach altogether. The second step is to keep your project on track by monitoring task-level execution. Use tools like Agile boards, Gantt chart, or even task lists to track progress of individual tasks. These tools help you visualize where things stand and whether tasks are being completed as planned. The third step is to regularly check in against the bigger picture plan. If you're using Scrum, you might already be familiar with sprints, planned work periods, usually 2 to 4 weeks long. At the beginning of each sprint, you plan the work, and at the end you review the progress. And that's great for sprint level management. But here's what's often missed. Many teams analyze their burn down charts, to see how much work was completed during the sprint, but they forget to compare progress against the overall project timeline. This is where your Gantt chart comes in handy. It gives you a bird's eye view on the entire project. Ask yourself, how far along are we compared to where we should be on the Gantt chart? Are we falling behind the schedule? If you notice that you're starting to run late, this is where the second principle, risk management, comes into play. So the second thing you need to do to stay in control of your project is to manage risks. But what does that even mean? And what is a risk exactly? If you're gambling, which I'm not assuming you are, by the way, you know the risks. You might win or you might lose depending on the odds on the game. If you're a race car driver, you're at risk of having an accident. Risks are inherent to every situation where uncertainty exists, and software development is no different. Let me give you a more substantial example of a risk in software development. Imagine your team is working with a new technology, something they've never used before. You've seen evidence that this technology works, so you're confident it's the right solution. But since no one on your team has experience with it, there's a risk that tasks involving this technology will take longer than expected. How do you deal with this risk? One way is to increase the buffer time in your estimates. You can adjust the delivery plan to account for the uncertainty, ensuring you have enough time if things take longer than planned. Here's another example. Let's say your project depends on a third-party team or external service. Because this team is outside of your direct control, there's always a risk they might not deliver on time. To mitigate this risk, you can be proactive. Reach out to them early, communicate your needs in advance, and make sure they're prepared when their involvement is required. In short, risks are any uncertainties that could impact your project's success. They might be technical challenges, external dependencies, or even unexpected events. Managing risks means accounting for them in your plan and taking steps to reduce their impact. Now that we know what risk management is, let's see what you can do with it. In general, there are two key approaches to handle risks. Account for risks. So adjust your plans to reflect potential risks. Use buffers in your estimates or delivery plans to give yourself extra time to handle uncertainties. For example, add buffer time for tasks involving new technology or unexpected challenges. This makes sure your project remains on track even if things don't go as planned. Second, you can mitigate risks. Take proactive steps such as assigning a senior engineer to guide the team through complex tasks, or work closely with external teams to make sure dependencies are met. Now, even with the best preparation, some risks will materialize. That's why reacting appropriately is just as important as preparing for them. For instance, if a task starts taking longer than expected, you might need to adjust your project plan. This could involve revisiting timeline, reallocating resources, or working with stakeholders to decide what to prioritize. In some cases, delays might mean you need to reduce the project scope to meet an unmovable deadline. By informing your stakeholders early, you give them the opportunity to prepare and minimize any negative impacts. So remember, execution comes down to two things: effective team coordination and proactive risk management. Master these and you'll consistently deliver IT projects no matter the challenges. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. In our next video, we'll discuss the arc that connects all three pillars of IT project management, critical for your career development. See you next time.